The entire company froze whenever Ethan Blackwell entered a room. Employees stopped talking. Managers straightened their backs. Even senior executives carefully chose every word around him. He was the youngest CEO in the company's history, a billionaire before 35, and famous for one thing above all else, being completely impossible to impress. People admired his success, but very few actually liked him. He was cold, distant, demanding, and known for firing employees without a second thought if they failed to meet his expectations. Most people believed he cared more about profits than human beings. Yet nobody dared challenge him because Ethan Blackwell always got what he wanted. On the 27th floor of Blackwell Global, there was one person who seemed completely invisible to everyone. Her name was Sophie Bennett. She was a 23-year-old intern who came from a small town and carried more worries than anyone around her realized. Her father had passed away 2 years earlier. Medical bills had left her family drowning in debt. Her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment. Sophie earned almost nothing as an intern, but she refused to quit because this internship represented the only chance she had to build a better future. Every morning she arrived before sunrise. Every evening she stayed later than everyone else. Yet despite her efforts, people constantly treated her as if she didn't belong. Senior employees gave her impossible tasks. Coworkers blamed her whenever mistakes happened. Some managers didn't even remember her name. She spent most days quietly accepting humiliation and moving forward because she couldn't afford to lose the opportunity. One afternoon the company held an important board meeting. Executives from multiple divisions gathered around the largest conference table in the building. The atmosphere was tense because Ethan himself would lead the discussion. Everyone knew that one wrong answer could end a career. Sophie had been assigned a simple task, preparing presentation materials and delivering documents before the meeting began. Unfortunately, she had skipped lunch again because she couldn't afford cafeteria prices that week. By the time the meeting started, she was exhausted and hungry. While organizing supplies beneath the conference table, she noticed a forgotten bag of snacks left behind from an earlier event. She hesitated for a moment. Then she quietly opened the bag and ate a few chips while finishing her work under the table, believing nobody would notice. At that exact moment, Ethan began his presentation. The room remained silent as executives listened carefully. Suddenly a loud crunch echoed from beneath the table. Every head turned. Another crunch followed. Then another. Confused expressions spread across the room. Ethan stopped speaking. Silence filled the space. Slowly he looked down. Sophie froze. Her face turned bright red. She was sitting beneath the table holding a bag of chips. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Several executives looked horrified. One manager actually covered his face. Everyone expected immediate disaster. Sophie slowly crawled out from under the table. Embarrassment flooded her entire body. She prepared herself to be fired. Ethan stared at her for several seconds. Then he asked a simple question. "Are those good?" The room fell into complete shock. Sophie blinked. "What?" Ethan pointed toward the chips. "I asked if they're good." She nodded awkwardly. "They're actually really good." For the first time in years, a faint smile appeared on Ethan's face. Then he resumed the meeting as if nothing had happened. Nobody understood what had just happened. Least of all Sophie. The next day whispers spread throughout the company. Employees couldn't stop discussing the strange incident. Some believed Sophie secretly knew the CEO. Others assumed she would still be fired eventually. But days passed and nothing happened. Instead, Ethan began noticing Sophie more often. Not because of the chips. Because she was different. Most people around him constantly tried to impress him. They agreed with everything he said. They laughed at jokes that weren't funny. They treated him like a king. Sophie did none of those things. She was polite but honest. Respectful but genuine. One evening Ethan stayed late reviewing reports. As he walked through an empty office floor, he noticed a light still on. Sophie sat alone at her desk finishing work that should have been completed by 3 other employees. He watched quietly for several minutes before approaching. "Why are you still here?" he asked. Sophie looked surprised. "Because this needs to be finished." Ethan glanced at the documents. "This isn't your responsibility." She hesitated. Then she answered honestly. "I know. But if I don't do it, they'll blame me anyway." Ethan frowned. "Who will?" Sophie lowered her eyes. It doesn't matter. But it mattered to Ethan. Over the next several weeks he quietly observed. He noticed managers assigning Sophie their own unfinished work. He noticed employees taking credit for her ideas. He noticed supervisors treating her unfairly because they knew she lacked influence. The more he watched, the more uncomfortable he became. For years he had believed his company rewarded hard work. Now he realized many employees survived by exploiting those beneath them. Sophie continued working without complaint. She never demanded recognition, never sought sympathy. She simply remained patient. One rainy evening Ethan found her sitting alone in the cafeteria after everyone else had left. She looked exhausted. A stack of unpaid bills sat beside her laptop. She quickly tried to hide them, but Ethan had already seen. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Sophie quietly admitted the truth. Her mother's health was worsening. Medical expenses continued growing. She was working part-time jobs outside the internship just to help pay rent. Some nights she slept only 3 hours. Ethan listened silently. Something about her story reminded him of his own mother. Before becoming wealthy, his family had struggled too. Success had changed his life so completely that he had almost forgotten what hardship felt like. From that evening forward, something inside him began changing. He didn't tell anyone. He simply paid more attention. Months passed. Sophie continued facing challenges. Her supervisor, Victor Langley, was especially cruel. Victor was powerful within the company and known for taking credit for other people's work. He saw Sophie as an easy target. During meetings he openly mocked her. He dismissed her suggestions. He reminded everyone that she was just an intern. Most employees stayed silent because Victor's influence protected him. Sophie often left work feeling defeated. Yet every morning she returned. Not because she enjoyed the treatment. Because her family depended on her. Ethan watched everything. Still, he waited. He needed to understand how deep the problem went. The turning point came during a major project involving one of the company's biggest clients. Sophie spent weeks developing an innovative strategy that could save the company millions of dollars. She worked late nights researching data, preparing forecasts, and solving problems nobody else noticed. When the final presentation arrived, Victor stole the entire project. He removed Sophie's name and presented the work as his own. The board applauded. Executives congratulated Victor. Sophie sat silently in the back of the room feeling her heart break. Years of disappointment suddenly felt heavier than ever. She wanted to stand up and tell the truth. She wanted to fight. But she knew nobody would believe an intern over a senior executive. So she stayed quiet. That evening she sat alone in the office long after everyone left. Tears rolled down her cheeks. For the first time, she considered quitting. Maybe she simply didn't belong in a world where powerful people always won. Maybe hard work truly didn't matter. As she packed her belongings, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Don't leave yet." She looked up. Ethan stood in the doorway. He walked inside and placed a folder on her desk. Sophie opened it. Her eyes widened. Inside were months of emails, project drafts, timestamps, and records proving she had created the entire strategy. Ethan had been quietly collecting evidence. Sophie stared at him in disbelief. "Why?" she whispered. Ethan took a deep breath. "Because nobody did it for me when I needed help." The following week the company held another board meeting. Victor entered confidently, expecting praise and possibly a promotion. Executives filled the room. Sophie sat quietly near the back. Then Ethan began speaking. At first everything seemed normal. He discussed financial results and company growth. Suddenly the giant screen behind him changed. Sophie's project files appeared. Then emails appeared. Then timelines. Then evidence showing exactly who created the work. Confusion spread across the room. Victor's face turned pale. Ethan calmly revealed everything. Every stolen idea. Every manipulated report. Every employee Victor had exploited over the years. The silence became unbearable. For the first time, the powerful executive who had seemed untouchable looked frightened. When Ethan finished, he turned toward Sophie. "Would you please stand?" The room watched as she slowly rose from her chair. Ethan looked directly at the board. "The person responsible for this project's success is not Victor Langley. It's Sophie Bennett." Applause began softly, then grew louder. Several executives stood. Others followed. Within moments the entire room was applauding. Sophie couldn't stop the tears filling her eyes. After years of being ignored, someone had finally seen her. Victor was immediately removed from his position pending investigation. Additional reviews uncovered other abuses of power. Several managers faced consequences. Company policies changed. Employees gained safer ways to report mistreatment. The culture slowly transformed. As for Sophie, she was offered a full-time position with a salary far beyond anything she had imagined. Her mother's medical treatment became affordable. The debt that had haunted her family finally began disappearing. Yet what mattered most wasn't the promotion or the money. It was dignity. It was knowing that her effort mattered. That her voice mattered. Over time, Ethan and Sophie developed an unexpected friendship. They shared conversations that had nothing to do with business. They spoke about family, loss, dreams, and second chances. Ethan discovered that Sophie's kindness made him feel more human than success ever had. Sophie discovered that behind Ethan's cold reputation was a man carrying years of loneliness. The company eventually noticed something else. The CEO who once seemed distant had changed. He listened more. He smiled more. He remembered employees' names. Many wondered what had happened. The answer was surprisingly simple. One exhausted intern eating snacks under a conference table had accidentally reminded the most powerful man in the building that success means very little if you forget how to care about people. And in the end, while everyone else obeyed the cold CEO, the one person who wasn't afraid to be herself became the person who changed his heart forever.